Hi everybody, Kelly here. Thanks. Oh, can't talk. Thank you very much for coming by. I'm actually able to sew a little bit, I think. Today's the 5th of April, and on the weekend, I was doing a bit of cutting off and on. I was able to cut a little bit, and then I went and sat down, and then I did some pressing, and then I went and sat down. So I'll show you what I've been up to, and I'll show you the pattern. Hold on. This is the pattern I'm going to do. When I did my very first class in 2015 at my local quilt shop, this is the one I did. And I paid for this pattern as part of the class, so I'm not going to give you any dimensions, but it's really easy to figure out how to do this. Alternating 4-patch is the name of the pattern. And you can make the 4 patches, which is this part, any method you want really. And whatever method this turns out to be, whatever the size of that whole square with the 4-patch in there, is how you cut your other ones so that they match. You can put as many borders on as you want or not. Now, the So Yeah guys in Las Vegas, So Yeah Quilting, they have a pattern that doesn't have any borders at all. The way I'm doing this is I have relatively plain fabric for my 4 patches and a print for this. And I'll show you this in a minute. I have to do more washing of other fabrics, so we'll get to that eventually. I've also seen this done, Teresa Down Under, where she takes, I think she takes a layer cake and then cuts it down and makes her 4 patches like that. So there's various ways to do it. It's basically what I'm telling you. And I will show you how this pattern tells you and how I learned to do this pattern when I was first learning how to quilt. This is like basic, but it'll work for what my friend's son wants, so that's what I'm going to go with. These are the 2 fabrics I'm going to make the 4 patches out of. This black that has just a little bit of flecks in it, it's really hard to see. The light's funny in here, but it just has a slight grayish fleck to it. It's not solid black. There, you can kind of see it a bit better in the weird light. If anybody cares, these are Andover fabrics. The black one I ordered from connectingthreads.com because I couldn't find one I liked. And this one I bought at that same local quilt store that I did the classes at. I usually go there to get whatever I can find because they have good service. Not a huge store, so the choice isn't very much, but they're still very good, so I like it there. This one is kind of directional, but I don't think it really matters because it's sort of directional this way and directional that way, so I'm just going to do it whatever. So they might not look all exactly the same. So I'll carry on, and you'll see more of the quilt as we go. When I cut the fabric, I did it folded. And I don't want to have that fold as a crease. It looks dumb. So I'm going to press them all out and make them smooth. And I will pin them together just to make sure I don't stretch them. Now, as far as the pattern is concerned, the black fabric is fabric B. And the gold fabric is fabric C. Usually, it is a good idea to press your seam toward the darker fabric. That's kind of a rule of thumb. That way you don't have dark fabric showing in a seam on light fabric. So what I kind of did, I just sort of pull it open and run my finger down it a little bit just to get it going. And I start with a dry iron. And I just give it sort of a nudge over, making sure that you're all the way over and you don't have your fabric like this with a little bunch up, right? Because then you won't have it accurate. So your seam has to be fully open. And I just kind of go along here. I could get out my big board for this, which I probably will do to make sure all of these are really straight before I go on to the next step. But for right now, I'm just going to give them a little get started press over like that. And then maybe I'll check them all for straightness before I go on to the next step. Alright. So, basically, I will have 4 of these before going on to the next step. In order to get the strip sets pressed properly, I put them on my big board because it's easier, a bit more room, and just kind of, flatten them down because I already did the finger pressing part. And I have one of these big metal rulers. It just helps keep things straight, so line it up the seams pretty, that's good, that's straight there. Yep, we're pretty straight. So then I'll give it one more press. Just kind of down the middle where the seam is. Just make sure it's open all the way. Give it a little pull just slightly if you need to. And then I'm going to put my steam on. I have to twiddle this button right here. I hope you guys can see that. It's hard to tell what's in view or not. But I flip the button and then I can get some steam. So then, we'll steam it. Make sure it's good. And then once you've done this, do not move it. Fabric has memory. Let it cool down, then you can move it and press the next one. The next step on the pattern requires me to cut a certain size so that I have two, a black and a gold, a black and a gold. Now I'm going to give myself a tidy edge here. So I'm lining up a line on my ruler on the seam line. And it's even on the bottom of the ruler there, and it's even there, so I know I'm nice and straight. I'll go over just a touch more, so I don't waste fabric. Perfect. Hold it down. Cut. Okay. Now I'm not telling you, again, because it's not my pattern, what size I'm cutting, but the pattern has 17 of those 4-patch blocks. So I need to make 34 of these little bits. With 4 pieces sewed like this, I should be just fine. But I always buy myself a little bit of extra fabric just to make sure. So I can always cut myself another one if I have to. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting them up. Because the seam, when I sewed the strips together, was pressed toward the dark, when you put them this way and flip it over, your seams will nest in the middle, like so. And you can sort of feel with your finger that you've got it tight and it's flat and everything. If you're not sure, what you can do is take a pin and stick it through the seam about a 1/4 inch away approximately, and that'll hold it. You can put it through all the way if you want, or you can just do this, just kind of hold it. And then what I did with the last one, just to make sure, until I get kind of in a groove and I can do a lot of these at once with doing it accurately, I actually just put this little piece right here in my machine, and I lengthened my stitch length just a bit, just in case, and I just sewed from like there to there, just to make sure. And I kind of left the pin in, like that, sewed along, slid the pin out, sewed a couple more stitches, and then checked it. And it looked perfect, so I went back and I put my stitch length back down to 2.2 that I usually use, and I sewed all the way along. I'm not going to show you on the machine because it's really hard to get close with this camera, but I think you can get the idea of what to do. So that's how you make a 4-patch, and I have to make 17 of these for the pattern, so I will keep going. I have 2 of those little pieces sewn together, and it's a 4-patch. You have to try to be very concerned about making your intersection there as close as you possibly can. Now that is just a hair off, and that is totally fine. Just don't make it like it's way off. So what I'm going to do, just because occasionally the pattern will tell you to press them a certain way, but this pattern doesn't actually tell me, and I'm going to be sewing them to one big square, so all I have to do is more meeting at the corners. So I'm actually going to just press the seam open. First of all, we set it. It just kind of relaxes the threads and the fabric. And then, if I can get it open, just kind of open your seam up. Come here, like so. Just kind of pat it along, run your finger along it. You could press it to one side too. It probably doesn't really matter in this instance, but I'm going to do it this way. We'll see how it goes. If I don't like it, I'll change my mind and press them to one side. Okay, a bit of steam. Voila. We'll see how that goes. I've been able to get on a roll a bit and chain piece these blocks together, and I'll show you what I mean. Just line it up. And so, I make sure that my seams are nesting perfectly. Okay, get past the seam. Now I'll grab another two. You guys can see this. Not sure if I'm in frame or not. There we go. Line them up directly on top of each other, like so. Line up the corners. It takes a bit of fiddling, but you can do it. Just like that. Corners line up. Like so. Other end lines up. So as I get to the end of sewing this one, then I just slide the next one in. You'll see what I mean in a second. Come on. There we go. Looks good. Okay. Next. Just like that. This is fabric A. Today is April 12th. As I told you guys before when I started this video, I only do a bit each day because I can't stand for long. Now, this fabric A, I am cutting these squares to be the same size as the 4 patches I made. I'm not quite done with the 4 patches. I still have to press a couple, and then I have to square a few up. But I already started cutting these, and I'm going to show you how the pattern is turning out in just a moment. I have to cut a strip all the way across, and then cut it down into the squares. So in order to be as accurate as possible, I can just fit this 20.5-inch ruler. It's the biggest one I have. It just fits. It doesn't quite get the selvage, but close enough. I can do it a proper cut on the rest of it, and then I cut it to size. I am now using this dark gray Aurifil thread to sew the blocks together. To sew the 4-patch blocks, I used black, but I switched to this one. You can always tell 50 weight Aurifil because it has an orange skein. The 40 weight is green. There. You can see how the pattern goes now. But at the bottom you can see I don't quite have all of the 4 patches done. But they'll get finished up soon. And then basically all I have to do is sew the rows together. There's the other 5 rows that I have to sew together. Now you see how the black squares are always in the same place. Makes a secondary pattern. And I'm being careful. I'm just walking slowly so you guys don't get jiggly here. That the print fabric is always right side up. The last thing you want is to sew it together and discover that one of those is upside down. It'll look dumb. The quilting design that my neighbor used, and we chose it together, is called Celtic Scroll. Because the quilt is all squares and lots of right angles, rule of thumb with choosing a quilting pattern is to make it curvy, fluidity, just to offset the whole squareness of it. So that's why she chose this one. Now, knights are not technically Celtic, but there is sort of that kind of connotation a little bit, so that's another reason why it was picked. And the dark gray thread that she used goes perfectly well with everything.